Welcome, deep divers. Picture this. A politician serves as president of the United States, loses their bid for re-election, and then 4 years later, against all odds, stages a monumental comeback to reclaim the White House.
Yeah.
It's a political comeback story that's not just rare, it's virtually unique in American history.
It truly is a remarkable feat. I mean, such a journey speaks volumes about a leader's resilience, yes, but also about the incredible fluidity and, shifting political tides of the era that made such an unprecedented return possible.
Absolutely, and that's precisely what we're diving into today. We're taking a deep dive into the utterly fascinating, complex, and frankly often contradictory life of Stephen Grover Cleveland, who holds the distinction of being both the 22nd and the 24th president of the United States. He is the only president ever to serve non-consecutive terms, and that fact alone tells you we're in for a captivating story.
Indeed. Our mission this deep dive is to meticulously unpack the entire journey of this truly unique leader. We'll trace his path from, well, surprisingly humble beginnings, through the cutthroat world of New York politics, right to the pinnacle of the highest office in the land.
Right.
We'll thoroughly explore the key policies he championed, the personal controversies that dog him, and the complex, often polarizing legacy that defines his two distinct presidencies.
And you'll discover why he became something of an icon for conservatives of his time, yet managed to profoundly anger many within his own Democratic Party. It's quite the paradox.
It really is.
And to guide us through this intricate narrative, our sources today are drawn from a rich tapestry of comprehensive biographical materials, incisive political analyses, and detailed historical accounts. This gives us a profound and, I think, nuanced insight into both Cleveland's public and his surprisingly dramatic private life.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
So buckle up because we're about to jump right in.
Let's do it.
Grover Cleveland's story begins in Caldwell, New Jersey. He was born Stephen Grover Cleveland on March 18, 1837, the fifth of what would eventually be 9 children.
9 children, wow.
Yeah. His parents were Anne Neal and Richard Foley Cleveland, a man deeply committed to his faith, serving as a Congregational and Presbyterian minister. Interestingly, he was actually named Stephen Grover in honor of the first pastor of his father's church. But as he matured, he became known simply as Grover.
Ah, okay. And his family tree is quite a mix, which, is often the case in early American history.
Right.
On his father's side, you have English roots, with the family having emigrated from Ipswich, England, way back in 1635.
Right, early settlers.
Exactly. His mother, Anne, brought a fascinating blend of Anglo-Irish Protestants and German Quakers from Philadelphia into the lineage. When for a fun little historical Easter egg, he was, believe it or not, distantly related to General Moses Cleveland.
No kidding.
Yeah, the very man who gave his name to the city of Cleveland, Ohio. Small world, isn't it?
That's a fantastic little connection. And when you look at his childhood, it wasn't exactly what you might expect for a future president. In 1841, his family relocated to Fayetteville, New York, where he spent a good chunk of his formative years. Neighbors from that period remembered him as full of fun and inclined to play pranks, and he apparently had a great love for outdoor sports. It sounds like a fairly idyllic, if bustling, childhood for a time.
But those carefree days, unfortunately, didn't last. The family moved again in 1850, this time to Clinton, New York, because his father took on missionary work. And as you can imagine, a minister's income, especially with 9 children, wasn't always sufficient.
Right. Money must have been tight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This financial strain forced young Grover to leave school. He undertook a 2-year mercantile apprenticeship in Fayetteville, essentially, working in a shop. He did return to schooling in Clinton after that, which tells you something about his desire for education. But his academic pursuits were tragically cut short again in 1853. His father died from a gastric ulcer. And in a rather poignant detail, he actually learned the news from a newspaper boy.
Oh, wow. What a jarring and sudden way to learn such devastating news. That profound loss, losing his father at such a young age, once again forced Cleveland to leave school to help support his now much more vulnerable family.
Yeah, he had to step up.
For a period, he found work as an assistant teacher at the New York Institute for the Blind in New York City, thanks to the connections of his older brother, William. It really highlights the immediate and direct impact of financial hardship on his early life, pushing him into the workforce far sooner than he might have intended.
Okay, let's unpack this journey for a moment. We have a minister's son, forced out of school by financial hardship, then declining an offer to have his college education paid for if he chose to follow in his father's footsteps and become a minister.
That's right, he turned it down.
Instead, he decides to move west in 1855 and almost serendipitously ends up in law. What a completely unexpected path for a future president, wouldn't you say?
It really is, and it speaks volumes about his independent spirit. He wasn't afraid to forge his own way. He lands in Buffalo, New York, where fate, or perhaps family connections, played a significant role. His influential uncle-in-law, Lewis F. Allen, provided him with a clerical job, which was crucial. And more importantly, Allen introduced him to the prestigious law firm of Rogers, Bowen, and Rogers. This wasn't just any firm, it was a well-respected institution.
And that firm had a remarkable history itself, didn't it? Millard Fillmore, the 13th U.S. president, had actually worked there earlier in his career.
Wow, presidential pedigree.
Exactly. So Cleveland took a clerkship, immersed himself in legal studies, and by 1859, he was admitted to the New York bar. His early legal career took a significant step when he left the Rogers firm in 1862 to establish his own practice, which shows a certain confidence.
Definitely.
Then in January 1863, he secured an appointment as Assistant District Attorney of Erie County, New York, really getting his feet wet in public service.
This period, of course, overlaps directly with the tumult of the American Civil War. Congress passed the Conscription Act of 1863, which meant able-bodied men were subject to being drafted into the Union Army.
Right.
However, the law allowed for a loophole. If you could afford it, you could pay a substitute to serve in your place. Cleveland, like many others who had the means, chose this option.
He paid $150, which, to give you a sense of scale, is equivalent to over $3,800 in today's money to George Beninsky, a Polish immigrant, to serve for him. Thankfully, Beninsky survived the war.
Ah, that's good.
Now, this decision, while perfectly legal at the time, would become a point of contention and scrutiny later in his political career. You can bet his opponents brought it up.
Oh, I'm sure. It's a detail that really crystallizes the era, showing the disparities even in wartime service. As a lawyer, Cleveland quickly developed a reputation for single-minded concentration and dedication to hard work. He took on some rather interesting and significant cases. For instance, he successfully defended a group of Irish-American nationalists known as Fenian Raiders pro bono in 1866, offering his services free of charge.
Wow, pro bono for Fenians. That's notable.
Right. These were men who had launched cross-border attacks into Canada, hoping to pressure Britain regarding Ireland, and Cleveland's defense of them was certainly something. Then, in 1868, he won a libel suit defense for Buffalo's commercial advertiser, which boosted his professional standing. Despite his growing income, he maintained a surprisingly simple, almost austere lifestyle in a boarding house, dedicating much of his earnings to support his mother and sisters.
Very dutiful.
Yet he wasn't a complete recluse. He also enjoyed an active social life in hotel lobbies and saloons, deliberately shunning Buffalo's more exclusive high society. It paints a picture of a man both dedicated to duty and yet quite grounded, almost plain-spoken.
What's truly fascinating here, and I think it's a critical through line for understanding Cleveland, is how these early experiences, his financial struggles, the early loss of his father, and even his pragmatic choice to hire a substitute during the Civil War, all profoundly shaped his later views.
Yeah, you can see the connections.
They instilled in him a deep sense of personal responsibility, a strong aversion to what he saw as government overreach or, unnecessary handouts, and a belief in individual self-reliance. This raises an important question for us. How much did these seemingly disparate early life events truly define the foundational principles of the president he would become?
Right.
It seems these were not just isolated incidents, but rather crucial lessons that cemented his political philosophy long before he ever held the highest office.
That's a powerful point. Those early struggles and decisions absolutely laid the groundwork for the leader he would become. Moving into his political life, Cleveland clearly aligned with the Democratic Party from his earliest involvement, developing a decided aversion to Republicans like John Fremont and Abraham Lincoln. In 1865, he ran for district attorney, but actually lost narrowly to his friend and roommate, Republican Lyman K. Bass. It's interesting how intertwined his personal and political life were from the start.
Definitely. His next significant step into public office came in 1870 when, with the help of his close friend Oscar Folsom, remember that name? Folsom.
Okay, Oscar Folsom, got it.
He secured the Democratic nomination for sheriff of Erie County, New York. He won that election by a rather narrow 303-vote margin, taking office at the relatively young age of 33.
Pretty young for a sheriff.
Yeah, and this was quite a financially rewarding position for him. The fees associated with the office yielded him up to $40,000, which, to put it into perspective for today, is over $1 million over his 2-year term. It was a significant financial windfall.
Wow. Now, this period of his life, while financially prosperous, also involved a particularly controversial and rather, well, grim incident that tells us something about his sense of duty.
Ah, yes, the executions.
Exactly. As sheriff, Cleveland was directly responsible for carrying out executions. Despite his personal reservations about capital punishment, which he certainly expressed, he chose to personally execute two murderers, Patrick Morrissey in September 1872 and John Gaffney in February 1873.
He pulled the lever himself.
He did. He did this rather than paying a deputy to do it, stating it was his responsibility. It was a stark example of his belief in fulfilling his duties, no matter how unpleasant. Biographer Rexford Tugwell, however, described this period as politically wasteful, noting that Cleveland was aware of graft and corruption within the office, but chose not to directly confront it during his tenure as sheriff.
Yeah, it's a complex picture of duty and pragmatism. Or maybe just focusing on the explicit duties, not the systemic ones yet.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
After his term as sheriff, Cleveland returned to his private law practice, opening a firm with his former opponent, Lyman K. Bass and Wilson S. Bissell.
Right. And it was during this return to private life, the deeply personal and controversial episode unfolded, one that would cast a long shadow over his future political ambitions, involving a woman named Maria Halpin.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting and frankly quite salacious. For the time, this deeply personal and controversial episode would dramatically impact his first presidential campaign.
Oh, definitely.
Halpin accused Cleveland of raping her, though early historical reports make it unclear whether their relationship was consensual or not. What we do know is that in 1876, Cleveland accused Halpin of alcoholism and had her child, Oscar Folsom Cleveland, born in 1874, removed and placed in the Protestant orphan asylum, and he paid for his stay.
And he also had Halpin briefly admitted to Providence Asylum, where she was, importantly, deemed not insane.
Right, that's a key point. Later, he even provided financial support for her to start a business outside Buffalo. However, the existence of this child and the circumstances surrounding Maria Halpin became a major campaign issue in his first presidential election.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Republicans tried to smear him as immoral for not raising the child himself. It was a brutal attack on his character.
And this kind of personal attack, in what's known as the Gilded Age of American politics, was, well, par for the course, right?
Absolutely. But let's shift to how he built his public image despite these personal shadows. The 1870s and early 1880s saw rampant corruption in Buffalo's municipal government, with both Democratic and Republican machines deeply entrenched in the spoils system.
Right, total gridlock and graft.
Exactly. In 1881, the Democrats, seeing an opportunity due to unusually disreputable Republican nominees, approached Cleveland. He agreed to run for mayor, but only on the condition that the rest of the ticket was to his liking, emphasizing his focus on reform.
Setting his terms early.
Yes, he was elected with a significant margin, a clear mandate for change.
His term as mayor of Buffalo, though relatively brief, was absolutely defined by his fierce fight against these entrenched political machines. He quickly earned the nickname Veto Mayor, and for good reason. His most famous act was vetoing a street cleaning bill where the Common Council awarded a staggering $422,000 contract to the highest bidder, despite a much lower bid being available for $100,000 less, purely due to political connections.
Just blatant cronyism.
Totally. His veto message was unsparing, calling it a barefaced, impudent, and shameless scheme to betray the interests of the people and to worse than squander the public money.
Wow, strong words.
And it worked. The council, faced with such public condemnation, actually reversed course and awarded the contract to the lowest bidder. He also requested the state legislature form a commission to develop a lower-cost sewer system plan for Buffalo, which was adopted.
So he was getting results.
Definitely. These actions quickly gained him a reputation for fearlessly purging government corruption, extending his recognition well beyond just Erie County.
Impressed by his integrity and decisive record, Democratic Party officials, with Daniel Manning playing a crucial role, quickly began to consider him for governor of New York. In 1882, amidst the split Republican Party, Cleveland was nominated as a compromise candidate after other leading Democrats deadlocked.
Right place, right time.
Partly, but also the right reputation. He went on to win by the largest margin in a contested New York election at the time, securing significant Democratic gains in the state legislature. As governor, he continued his unwavering fiscal conservatism, famously sending 8 vetoes in his first 2 months alone.
8 vetoes in 2 months.
Yeah. This wasn't just political grandstanding. It was a consistent application of his core belief in limited government spending.
One of his most notable and, at the time, highly controversial actions as governor was vetoing a popular bill to reduce fares on New York City elevated trains to 5 cents.
Ah, yes, the Jay Gould fight.
Exactly. The owner of the elevated lines, Jay Gould, was incredibly unpopular, and his fare increases were widely denounced. Yet Cleveland, ever the man of principle, saw the bill as fundamentally unjust.
Why? What was his reasoning?
He argued that Gould had taken over a failing system and made it solvent, and that altering his franchise would violate the contract clause of the federal constitution.
The legal argument.
Right, and in a surprising turn, newspapers, which typically sided with public sentiment against big business, actually praised his principled stance. It really showcased his willingness to stand firm, even when it was unpopular, if he believed it was legally and morally right.
And here's where we see a fascinating and crucial political alignment forming. His defiance of the corrupt elements, particularly Tammany Hall, the powerful New York City political organization, earned him their fierce enmity.
They hated him.
Oh, yeah. But paradoxically, it garnered him the crucial support of reform-minded Republicans, including none other than Assembly Minority Leader Theodore Roosevelt.
TR and Cleveland working together, that's something.
It is. Their unexpected cooperation on municipal reform legislation truly gained Cleveland national recognition. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Cleveland's actions as mayor and governor were absolutely pivotal. They solidified his national image as an unyielding reformer and a staunch fiscal conservative.
Right.
This is crucial context for understanding his presidential campaigns. He wasn't just another politician climbing the ranks. He had a proven track record of fighting corruption and upholding principles, even when it meant standing alone.
That's a critical point. He had established a reputation for integrity that cut across party lines, making him a unique figure. Cleveland's ascent to the presidency in 1884 was almost tailor-made for him, a direct result of the specific political climate. The Republican nominee, James G. Blaine, had alienated many within his own party, a distinct faction known as the Mugwumps.
Right, the reformers.
Exactly. They viewed him as overly ambitious and morally questionable, tainted by past scandals. This opened a clear, wide path for the Democrats, a party that had struggled nationally for decades. Samuel J. Tilden, the party's 1876 nominee, was initially considered but declined due to ill health, leaving the door open for a new face.
And Cleveland, despite continued opposition from Tammany Hall, which still resented his reform efforts, quickly emerged as the leading Democratic contender. It's one of those great ironies of politics. The very enemies he made by fighting corruption in New York ironically made him friends among reformers nationally, seeing him as a rare beacon of honesty.
So his enemies helped him, in a way.
In a way, yes. He was nominated on the second ballot, a relatively quick ascent for an outsider, with Thomas A. Hendricks chosen as his running mate to balance the ticket geographically and ideologically.
The campaign against Blaine was absolutely brutal, defined by an intensity of negative campaigning that would shock even today's voters. Its central issue, however, was political corruption, and Cleveland's hard-won reputation as an honest opponent of corruption was, without a doubt, his strongest asset.
Yeah, that was his brand.
His campaign famously adopted the slogan, created by William C. Hudson, "A public office is a public trust." It perfectly encapsulated his appeal, and those reform-minded Republicans, the Mugwumps.
Yeah, great name.
Right. Figures like Carl Schurz and Henry Ward Beecher actually crossed party lines to support Cleveland, driven by a desperate desire for civil service reform and greater government efficiency.
But the mudslinging was truly relentless from both sides. Democrats attacked Blaine for questionable deals with railroads, often ending their rallying cry with, "Burn this letter," referring to incriminating correspondence that exposed his alleged financial improprieties. In response, Republicans unearthed the highly personal Maria Halpin scandal, chanting the infamous, "Ma, where's my pa? Going to the White House, ha ha ha." It was a direct, deeply personal attack.
Just brutal. How did Cleveland handle that?
Cleveland, to his credit, responded remarkably by instructing his supporters to, above all, tell the truth, openly admitting to paying child support. And an affidavit from Halpin, published shortly before the election, further stated that Cleveland's paternity was undisputed, a strategic move by his campaign to, get ahead of the story.
Why? Imagine campaigning for the highest office in the land while a scandal about an alleged illegitimate child is front and center, being weaponized by your opponents. It just shows you how incredibly intense and personally invasive Gilded Age politics could be.
Absolutely. The election itself hinged on a few crucial swing states: New York, New Jersey, Indiana, and Connecticut. Despite Tammany Hall's deep dislike for Cleveland, they ultimately supported the Democratic ticket, which was absolutely vital for securing New York.
They held their noses and voted Democrat.
Pretty much. And in a monumental gaffe that proved devastating for the Republicans, a Republican speechmaker infamously denounced Democrats as the party of rum, Romanism, and rebellion.
Oh, no.
Yeah. That profoundly alienated many Irish-American voters in those crucial swing states, directly impacting the outcome. Cleveland narrowly won all 4 swing states, including New York, by just 1,200 votes.
So close.
Unbelievably close. He secured the popular vote by a mere 0.25%, and the Electoral College 219-182. The famous riposte to the Republican chant quickly became, "Gone to the White House! Ha ha ha!" confirming his dramatic victory.
What a race. Okay, so Cleveland's first presidency, 1885 to 1889. What were the hallmarks?
It truly became a living testament to his commitment to reform and his unwavering philosophy of limited government. On civil service reform, which was a huge issue for the mugwumps who helped elect him, he firmly opposed the spoils system.
Right, a public office is a public trust.
Exactly. He declared publicly that he wouldn't fire competent Republicans simply to make room for Democrats, nor would he make appointments solely based on party service. He actively used his appointment powers to reduce the number of federal employees, believing many departments were bloated with political time servers.
Cleaning house.
Though, we should note, later in his term, under increasing pressure from his own party, eager for patronage, he did replace more partisan Republican officeholders. Still, his administration made more merit-based appointments than his predecessors, marking a significant step towards reform.
He also signed several truly landmark pieces of legislation and famously wielded his veto power with unprecedented frequency.
Oh yeah, the vetoes.
In 1887, he signed the Interstate Commerce Act, a really significant moment because it made the railroad industry the first in the nation to be subject to federal regulation by a regulatory body.
Huge deal. First regulatory agency.
Right. This was a response to widespread public outcry over railroad abuses, and it laid the groundwork for future federal oversight of industry. He also signed the Dawes Act, a policy intended to encourage the cultural assimilation of Native Americans.
A very controversial one in hindsight.
Extremely. Cleveland genuinely believed that by subdividing their communal tribal lands into individual allotments, he was helping them integrate and lift themselves out of poverty. But the tragic irony is that this policy, designed with what he saw as good intentions, actually led to Native Americans ceding control of about 2/3 of their land, a staggering 100 million acres between 1887 and 1934, and drastically weakened their tribal governments.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that even well-meaning policies can have devastating unintended consequences, a classic example of good intentions colliding with disastrous results.
And speaking of his use of power, his wielding of the veto pen was truly extraordinary.
Absolutely. He used it an astonishing 414 times in his first term alone, which was more than 4 times any previous president.
414 times? What was he vetoing?
A lot of it was private pension bills for Civil War veterans. He argued that Congress shouldn't just override rejections from the Pension Bureau. He also famously vetoed a general pension bill that would grant pensions for disabilities not directly caused by military service, fearing it would open the floodgates to fraud and unnecessary government expense.
Sticking to his limited government guns.
Consistently. And his most well-known veto, the one that really solidified his image as a champion of limited government, was certainly the Texas Seed Bill in 1887. After a severe drought, Congress appropriated $100,000 for seed grain for struggling Texas farmers.
Seems reasonable enough.
Not to Cleveland. He vetoed it, delivering a message that became a defining statement of his political philosophy. I can find no warrant for such an appropriation in the Constitution, and I do not believe that the power and duty of the general government ought to be extended to the relief of individual suffering. Though the people support the government should not support the people.
Wow. That's a clear statement.
It absolutely set a precedent, or at least a powerful rhetorical framework, for future debates on federal aid. He argued federal aid would weaken national character and prevent private charity. That wasn't just a political decision. It was a foundational philosophical statement about American self-reliance.
A debate we definitely still have today.
For sure. He also asserted executive power quite forcefully against what he saw as congressional overreach, particularly with the Tenure of Office Act of 1867.
Ah, the thing that tripped up Andrew Johnson.
Exactly. This act required Senate approval for presidential dismissals. Cleveland objected to it vehemently on principle, viewing it as an unconstitutional infringement on executive authority. His steadfast refusal to abide by it ultimately led to its repeal in 1887, marking a significant victory for presidential power.
Okay, so reform, limited government, executive power. What about the economy? Big issues there too, right?
Oh, huge. Perhaps none was more contentious than the fierce silver debate of the 1880s. Proponents of free silver, primarily Western Republicans and Southern Democrats, advocated for currency backed by both gold and silver.
Why silver?
Their goal was to inflate a deflating currency, which they believed would help debtors and farmers. On the other side, gold standard proponents, mostly from the Northeast and from both parties, wanted currency backed by gold alone, believing it ensured monetary stability.
And Cleveland?
Cleveland and his Treasury Secretary Daniel Manning were firmly in the gold standard camp. They tried, unsuccessfully, to repeal the Bland-Allison Act of 1878, which had required the government to coin silver. This highly divisive issue remained largely unresolved throughout his term, a simmering tension that would soon boil over.
Another major financial issue was the protective tariff. High tariffs, originally temporary measures from the Civil War, had created a massive and embarrassing government surplus.
Right, too much money coming in.
Exactly. Cleveland, like most Democrats, favored a significant reduction in tariffs for revenue only, meaning tariffs should simply cover necessary government expenses, not protect specific domestic industries. Republicans, conversely, favored high tariffs to shield nascent American industries from foreign competition.
The classic debate.
In his powerful 1887 message to Congress, Cleveland highlighted the indefensible extortion of collecting more money than was needed from the public. While a bill to reduce tariffs did pass the House, it ultimately died in the Republican-controlled Senate, setting the stage for future presidential campaigns and defining party lines for decades.
So tariffs and silver, big unresolved fights. What about foreign policy?
In foreign and military policy during his first term, Cleveland was a committed non-interventionist, a stark contrast to some of the expansionist sentiments of the era. He vehemently opposed expansion and imperialism, famously refusing to promote the previous administration's Nicaragua Canal Treaty, for example. His Secretary of State, Thomas F. Bayard, adopted a remarkably conciliatory approach in negotiations with the United Kingdom over fishing rights off Canada, prioritizing diplomacy and de-escalation.
Interesting, but he wasn't neglecting the military, right? You mentioned modernization earlier.
Not at all. And this commitment to principle extended to his approach to national defense. Beyond the diplomatic chessboard, Cleveland also methodically prioritized self-defense and modernization for the military. He appointed the Board of Fortifications, more commonly known as the Endicott Board, in 1885 to recommend a brand new coastal defense system for the nation.
Right, the coastal defenses.
Their 1886 report proposed a massive $127 million program, which, to put it into context, would be over $4.4 billion in 2024 terms for 29 vital harbors, a plan that was largely implemented by 1910.
Wow, a huge investment.
And furthermore, his energetic Secretary of the Navy, William C. Whitney, spearheaded a significant modernization effort for the Navy, ordering 16 new steel-hulled warships, including the second-class battleships Maine and Texas, by 1888.
The Maine and the Texas, those will become very important later.
Absolutely crucial for the Spanish-American War a decade later, demonstrating Cleveland's foresight in military preparation, even if he was an anti-imperialist.
Shifting to civil rights. The period saw limited gains for African Americans under Cleveland's administration. Like many Northerners and white Southerners of his time, he viewed Reconstruction as a failed experiment and was reluctant to use federal power to enforce the 15th Amendment, which guaranteed voting rights.
Believing it was a state issue.
Pretty much, believing it was a state rather than a federal matter. While he did allow the prominent abolitionist Frederick Douglass to retain his post as Recorder of Deeds in Washington, D.C., he appointed another black man as his replacement upon Douglass's resignation, a decision that caused some outrage, but which Cleveland justified by claiming to know the man personally.
What about other groups? Chinese immigrants, Native Americans?
Regarding Chinese immigrants, Cleveland held beliefs that, by modern standards, are certainly problematic. He believed they were unwilling to assimilate into white American society. His Secretary of State, Bayard, negotiated an extension to the Chinese Exclusion Act, which had already severely restricted Chinese immigration.
Right, that act was already in place.
Yes. Cleveland actively lobbied Congress to pass the Scott Act in 1888, which went even further, preventing Chinese immigrants who had temporarily left the U.S. from returning. He signed this into law on October 1st, 1888, solidifying a discriminatory stance.
Oof. And Native Americans, we mentioned the Dawes Act.
Right. For Native American policy, Cleveland viewed them primarily as wards of the state rather than sovereign nations. He advocated for what he saw as their uplift through cultural assimilation, primarily via the Dawes Act, which, as we discussed, fragmented tribal communal landholdings into individual allotments.
With devastating results.
Exactly. While this policy was surprisingly endorsed by some Native leaders who believed it would help them, the vast majority disapproved, and it ultimately led to significant land loss and severely weakened tribal governments. However, on a more positive note, he did demonstrate a commitment to existing treaties when he rescinded President Chester A. Arthur's executive order opening 4 million acres of Winnebago and Crow Creek lands to white settlement. Believing it violated those treaties, he sent Army troops to enforce the treaties and ordered an investigation, showing that his adherence to law could sometimes work in Native Americans' favor.
So a very mixed record there. On a more personal note, Cleveland entered office as a bachelor.
He did, his sister Rose Cleveland initially serving as his White House hostess. However, he didn't remain a bachelor for long. In a truly unique White House wedding, he married Frances Folsom.
Folsom, there's that name again. Oscar Folsom's daughter.
The very same. He married Frances Folsom on June 2, 1886, in the White House Blue Room. He was 49, and she was just 21.
Wow, quite an age gap. Youngest First Lady ever.
Youngest First Lady in history, incredibly popular. The marriage was somewhat unusual, as Cleveland had actually been the executor of her father's estate and had supervised her upbringing after her father's death.
That is interesting.
Yes, but the public, perhaps charmed by Frances, generally took no exception to the age difference or the circumstances. The Clevelands went on to have 5 children together: Ruth, Esther, Marion, Richard, and Frances.
Baby Ruth. Was the candy bar named after her?
That was the claim later asserted, though, it's debated. And of course, Cleveland also acknowledged his paternity of Oscar Folsom Cleveland, the child born to Maria Halpin in 1874, a lingering shadow of his earlier life.
Always there in the background. Did he make an impact on the courts in this first term?
He certainly did. He made a lasting impact on the judiciary, successfully nominating 2 Supreme Court justices. Lucius Q.C. Lamar, confirmed by a narrow 32-28 vote, and Chief Justice Melville Fuller, confirmed 41-20.
Appointing a Chief Justice is a big deal.
Huge. He was only the second Democrat to appoint a Chief Justice after Andrew Jackson. He also nominated a substantial 41 lower federal court judges, solidifying his influence on the federal bench for years to come.
So summing up this first term,
it truly showcases Cleveland's core values in action. His unwavering fiscal conservatism, his dedication to limited government, and his strong sense of executive power, often asserted against congressional overreach. This raises an important question for us. How did these very principles, which earned him considerable praise and a reputation for integrity and strength, also, perhaps paradoxically, lay the groundwork for his later unpopularity?
Right.
As the country faced new and increasingly complex challenges and demands, his steadfastness, while admirable to some, would prove inflexible and even frustrating to others who sought more proactive government intervention.
That's a crucial tension, isn't it? The very qualities that made him a hero to some became a liability to others. And now for the ultimate political plot twist in American history, the election of 1888.
The rematch.
Exactly. Cleveland was, naturally, renominated by the Democrats, with Ellen G. Thurman chosen as his running mate after Vice President Hendricks had sadly died in office in 1885. The Republicans, looking for their own comeback, nominated Benjamin Harrison.
This campaign saw the Republicans gain a significant upper hand, campaigning heavily and effectively on the protective tariff issue, which, as we discussed, was a major point of contention and resonated strongly with voters in key industrial states.
The tariff comes back to bite him.
It does. Furthermore, the Democratic Party in Cleveland's crucial home state of New York was deeply divided over the controversial gubernatorial candidacy of David B. Hill, weakening Cleveland's support right where he needed it most.
Trouble at home.
And, to make matters worse, a scandal erupted involving the British ambassador, who foolishly expressed support for Cleveland, inadvertently costing the president crucial Irish-American votes in New York and other swing states.
Oh, the Murchison letter. Yeah, that was bad.
Really bad timing.
Talk about a plot twist. Winning the popular vote but ultimately losing the election. It's a tale as old as time, or at least as old as American presidential elections.
It happens.
Cleveland, despite his national appeal, won the popular vote with 48.6%, compared to Harrison's 47.8%, a clear plurality. But crucially, he lost the Electoral College, 168-233.
The Electoral College strikes again.
He lost New York by only 14,373 votes, a truly agonizingly close defeat in a state that was crucial for an electoral victory. And to add insult to injury, the Republicans were widely believed to have won Indiana through fraudulent voting practices, specifically employing a tactic known as blocks of five.
Right, buying votes.
Basically, where voters were paid $5 for their vote, it was a bitter, hard-fought loss.
But the story doesn't end there, of course. As Francis Cleveland famously told a staff member upon leaving the White House after the defeat, in a remarkably prescient moment, "Now, Jerry, I want you to take good care of all the furniture and ornaments in the house, for I want to find everything just as it is now when we come back again."
Wow. And did Jerry ask when?
He apparently did, likely with some surprise. She simply responded, "We are coming back 4 years from today."
What an astonishing, almost defiant prediction to have that kind of certainty, that unshakable belief after such a stinging defeat. It really speaks to an incredible sense of conviction, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's not just a prophecy. It's a profound window into their mindset, a refusal to accept the outcome as permanent. It sets the stage for what would be one of the most remarkable comebacks in American political history.
So what did he do in those 4 years off?
In the interim, between presidencies from 1889 to 1893, the Clevelands moved to New York City, where the former president joined a law firm. His practice brought a moderate income, though he made sure to carve out considerable time for his true passion. Fishing at his vacation home, Gray Gables in Massachusetts, became a real obsession for him.
A fisherman president.
He also sold his Washington, D.C. estate, Oakview, for a considerable sum, $140,000, which is over $4.3 million in today's money. This area later became known as Cleveland Park.
Ah, okay. And family life.
While living in New York, their first child, Ruth, was born in 1891, the daughter who would later, maybe, inspire the famous candy bar. Politically, Cleveland kept a watchful eye on the Harrison administration, and he was deeply troubled by their policies.
Like the McKinley Tariff.
Exactly, the aggressively protectionist McKinley Tariff and the Sherman Silver Purchase Act, which significantly increased the amount of money backed by silver. These were policies Cleveland profoundly deplored, seeing them as antithetical to his principles of sound money and free trade.
Did he speak out right away?
Initially, he refrained from public criticism, demonstrating a certain statesman-like restraint. But by 1891, he felt compelled to speak out. He addressed his concerns in a widely published silver letter to a meeting of reformers in New York, effectively thrusting him back into the political spotlight just as the 1892 election cycle was beginning to heat up. He couldn't stay silent.
The comeback begins.
His return to the political spotlight, combined with his recent pronouncements on critical monetary issues, immediately made him a leading contender for the Democratic nomination in 1892. However, he faced strong opposition from New York Senator David B. Hill, who was a formidable political operator.
Hill again?
Yes. Hill successfully united all the anti-Cleveland elements within the Democratic Party. The Silverites, who opposed his gold standard stance, the protectionists who disliked his tariff views, and of course Tammany Hall, which he had consistently fought.
But Cleveland prevailed.
He did. Despite Hill's various political maneuvers and attempts to block him, Cleveland, riding a wave of national support for his reformist image, secured the nomination on the very first ballot at the party convention in Chicago.
First ballot, decisive.
Very. To balance the ticket and appease some of the Silverite wing of the party, Adlai E. Stevenson of Illinois, who was known to be a Silverite, was chosen as his running mate. It was a strategic choice to unite a somewhat fractured party.
So 1892, the rematch. Cleveland versus Harrison again, but different this time.
Very different. The campaign was notably described as the cleanest, quietest, and most creditable election in recent memory. This somber atmosphere is largely due to the tragic circumstance of President Harrison's wife, Caroline, dying of tuberculosis shortly before the election.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah. Out of respect, all the candidates ceased campaigning, creating a period of national mourning and reflection rather than political bickering.
Beyond the somber tone, the key issues had also fundamentally shifted since 1888. The McKinley Tariff, which Harrison had signed into law, had made imported goods so expensive that many voters were now turning decisively towards tariff reform and growing deeply skeptical of big business.
So the tariff was hurting Harrison now.
Exactly. This economic discontent significantly hurt Harrison's re-election chances. We also saw a significant defection of many Westerners who traditionally leaned Republican to James B. Weaver, the candidate of the new Populist Party.
Right, the populist rise.
Weaver's platform promised appealing solutions: free silver, generous veterans' pensions, and an 8-hour workday, tapping into widespread economic frustration.
What's truly fascinating here, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, it highlights the immense volatility of public opinion during this period. The political landscape shifted dramatically in just 4 short years, allowing Cleveland to stage this unprecedented comeback.
And the Democrats were more united this time.
Crucially, yes. The Democratic Front, which had been so fractured in 1888, was united this time. Tammany Hall, despite his previous opposition, saw the writing on the wall, supported the national ticket, ensuring a strong Democratic showing in New York.
Okay.
Furthermore, many populists and labor supporters, disillusioned by the brutal crackdowns on strikes like the Homestead and Tennessee coal and Iron Co. conflicts, ultimately endorsed Cleveland, seeing him as a lesser evil or perhaps a more pragmatic choice.
So the coalition shifted.
Completely. The final result was a decisive victory for Cleveland, securing wide margins in both the popular and electoral votes. This marked his 3rd consecutive popular vote plurality, an incredible achievement, and most famously cemented his place in history as the first and only U.S. president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. He had returned to the White House.
The comeback complete. But the second term wasn't exactly smooth sailing, was it?
Oh, far from it. Cleveland's second presidency from 1893 to 1897 was immediately thrown into the deep end of crisis. Just 1 month after his inauguration, the Panic of 1893 struck with devastating force, sparking a severe national depression.
Right. One of the worst in U.S. history up to that point.
Absolutely. This economic downturn was significantly worsened by a critical gold shortage, which was widely attributed to the increased coinage of silver mandated by the Sherman Silver Purchase Act. Cleveland, ever the decisive leader, swiftly called Congress into a special session to address what had become a national emergency.
And the fight was over silver again.
Primarily, yes. The debate over coinage was once again heated and fiercely partisan. However, the sheer severity of the panic and the visible suffering across the nation pushed many moderates, even some who had previously supported silver, to back the repeal of the Sherman Silver Purchase Act, recognizing the immediate need for stability.
Did he get it repealed?
He did. After 15 weeks of intense and often acrimonious debate, the House passed the repeal. Cleveland personally lobbied Congress, working tirelessly to convince enough Democrats, combined with Eastern Republicans, to secure the repeal in the Senate by a 48-37 vote.
A big win for him, but did it fix the economy?
Not entirely. It was a monumental political victory for him, but it also marked the beginning of the end of silver as a primary basis for American currency, cementing the gold standard for decades. Despite this, gold reserves continued to deplete, necessitating further bond issues to shore up the nation's finances, indicating the deep-seated nature of the economic woes.
So the crisis continued. What about the tariff? He wanted reform there, too.
He did. Having tackled the immediate silver crisis, Cleveland, true to his long-held convictions, once again sought tariff reform to reverse the aggressively protectionist effects of the McKinley Tariff. Representative William L. Wilson introduced a bill in December 1893 for moderate downward revisions, especially on raw materials, and crucially proposed a 2% income tax on incomes over $4,000 to offset any potential revenue loss.
An income tax? That's new.
Relatively new, yes. It passed the House by a considerable margin, riding the wave of anti-tariff sentiment.
But the Senate?
The Senate. The bill faced relentless and powerful opposition there. It was led by Arthur Pugh Gorman of Maryland, a seasoned political operator who insisted on more protection for his state's industries. The lobbying efforts were intense, particularly from powerful special interests.
Like the Sugar Trust.
Exactly. The bill ultimately passed the Senate with over 600 amendments, which effectively nullified most of the original reforms and transformed it into a protectionist measure. The Sugar Trust, in particular, notably lobbied for changes that significantly favored their interests.
So Cleveland didn't get his tariff reform.
Not really. Cleveland was absolutely outraged, denouncing the final product as a disgraceful product of the control of the Senate by trusts and business interests. Despite his strong feelings, he believed it was still a marginal improvement over the McKinley Tariff, and as a protest, allowed it to become law without his signature.
Let it become law without signing. A strong message.
A very strong message. It was a bitter, partial victory at best, showcasing the formidable power of special interests.
What about voting rights during this term? Any changes?
On the crucial matter of voting rights, Cleveland's actions continue to trend away from federal protection. He had campaigned vigorously against the Lodge Bill in 1892, which would have strengthened voting rights protections for African Americans through federal supervisors.
Right. He opposed that.
Then, in 1894, he successfully repealed the Enforcement Act of 1871, which had previously provided detailed federal overseeing of elections. This marked a significant pendulum swing away from protecting voting rights and further eroded federal oversight in an era when southern states were increasingly enacting discriminatory voting laws like poll taxes and literacy tests.
So, a step backward for voting rights protection. The economy was still struggling, right? Did that lead to unrest?
Absolutely. The Panic of 1893 severely damaged labor conditions across the country, fostering widespread unrest and economic hardship. In 1894, a group of working men known as Coxey's Army, led by Jacob S. Coxey, organized a protest march to Washington, D.C.
Coxey's Army, I've heard of them. What did they want?
They wanted to express their anger at Cleveland's policies. They advocated for a national roads program to create jobs and a weakened currency to help farmers struggling with debt.
Yeah.
Only a few hundred actually reached D.C., and their leaders were promptly arrested for walking on the Capitol lawn, effectively dispersing the group.
Arrested for walking on the grass.
Yep. Though perhaps not a direct threat to the government, it was a clear and public signal of growing Western dissatisfaction with Eastern monetary policies and the federal government's perceived inaction on unemployment.
And then came the Pullman Strike. That was much bigger.
Oh, much bigger and far more impactful. The Pullman Strike, later that same year. This began as a strike against the Pullman Company over low wages and incredibly long hours for its workers. It quickly escalated into massive sympathy strikes, led by the charismatic American Railway Union leader Eugene V. Debs.
Debs, right.
By June 1894, an astonishing 125,000 railroad workers were on strike, effectively paralyzing commerce across the nation. It was an unprecedented challenge to the country's infrastructure and economy.
How did Cleveland respond to that?
Cleveland believed a federal solution was absolutely necessary, arguing that the disruption impacted interstate commerce and the carrying of federal mail, and that some railroads were even in federal receivership. He obtained a federal court injunction to force the workers back to their jobs.
An injunction against the strike?
Yes. When the strikers refused to obey it, he made a decisive and highly controversial move. He sent federal troops into Chicago and 20 other rail centers to break the strike.
Federal troops against strikers?
Yes. He famously declared, if it takes the entire Army and Navy of the United States to deliver a postcard in Chicago, that card will be delivered.
Wow. How was that received?
It was deeply polarizing. This intervention, while restoring order, deeply angered Illinois Democrats, including Governor John P. Altgeld, who felt the federal government was overstepping its bounds. More importantly, it solidified the animosity of labor unions nationwide, hardening their attitude toward his administration.
So what does this all mean for the working people of America at the time? Cleveland was hailed by some for restoring order, but others saw him as a tool of big business.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Cleveland was hailed by some, especially industrialists and conservative elements, for restoring order and upholding the rule of law, protecting private property and the flow of commerce. They saw him as a decisive leader during a crisis. But others, particularly labor unions, their sympathizers, and many agrarian populists, saw him as a callous tool of big business, prioritizing corporate interests and property rights over the desperate plight of the working class. It fundamentally shaped how many Americans viewed his presidency and the role of government in labor disputes.
A defining moment, for sure. Let's shift to foreign policy in the second term. Hawaii was a big issue.
Huge. In foreign policy during his second term, Cleveland adopted a firm and consistent anti-imperialist stance, a position that would become particularly significant regarding Hawaiian annexation. In his first term, he had supported free trade with the Hawaiian Kingdom and even a naval station at Pearl Harbor.
Okay.
However, in 1893, just before he took office for his second term, a controversial coup had overthrown Queen Liliuokalani, orchestrated by European and American businessmen with the clear involvement of U.S. Marines. This presented Cleveland with an immediate and thorny diplomatic challenge.
So the Queen was overthrown right before he came back.
Exactly. Just 5 days after taking office for his second term, Cleveland acted decisively, withdrawing the annexation treaty that the previous administration had submitted to the Senate. He then sent former Congressman James Henderson Blount to Hawaii to conduct a thorough investigation.
Blount's investigation, what did it find?
Blount's report was damning. It found that Native Hawaiians overwhelmingly opposed annexation and highlighted significant U.S. diplomatic and military involvement in the coup. Cleveland, a staunch anti-imperialist, agreed with Blount's findings. He openly opposed American actions, condemned the coup as a substantial wrong and an act of war, and called for the Queen's restoration.
He wanted to put the Queen back on the throne.
He did. He emphasized America's policy of non-intervention in the domestic affairs of foreign countries. He felt there was a grave injustice.
Did Congress agree?
It was divided. This principled stance led to a significant congressional divide. The House of Representatives adopted a resolution against annexation and censured the U.S. minister who was involved in the coup. However, the Senate, despite being under Democratic control, opposed Cleveland's views and his efforts to restore the Queen.
The Senate opposed him again.
Yep, they produced their own report, known as the Morgan Report, which strikingly contradicted Blount's findings, claiming the overthrow was an internal affair and that U.S. troops acted quietly and respectfully. This report even referenced the 1887 Bayonet Constitution as an act of abdication by the Queen, attempting to legitimize the new regime.
So what happened in the end?
Ultimately, facing a divided Congress and the practical reality of the new government, Cleveland reluctantly dropped his push to restore the Queen and recognize the new Republic of Hawaii under President Dole, maintaining diplomatic relations but never endorsing the annexation he so vehemently opposed.
Well, principled stand, but ultimately unsuccessful in reversing the coup. What about closer to home, Venezuela?
Right, the Venezuela boundary dispute. Closer to home, Cleveland adopted a broad and assertive interpretation of the Monroe Doctrine. When Britain and Venezuela became embroiled in a heated boundary dispute, Cleveland and his Secretary of State, Richard Olney, protested forcefully, asserting American national interest in preventing European encroachment in the Western Hemisphere.
Asserting the Monroe Doctrine strongly.
Very strongly. This vigorous stance eventually led to an international arbitration in 1899, which awarded most of the disputed territory to British Guiana. But significantly, it improved relations with Latin American countries, who appreciated the U.S. standing up to a European power and encouraged arbitration as a method for resolving international disputes. It solidified America's position as a regional power.
And the military modernization continued.
It did. Cleveland's second administration continued the modernization efforts that had begun in his first term. Construction on the massive Endicott program for coastal fortifications carried on, strengthening America's defenses. The U.S. Army finalized the adoption of the Krag-Jurgensen rifle, a significant technological upgrade, as it was the Army's first bolt-action repeating rifle.
Improving firepower.
Definitely. And his Secretary of the Navy, Hillary A. Herbert, fully embracing Alfred Thayer Mahan's aggressive naval strategy, advocating for a powerful offensive fleet, proposed ordering 5 new battleships and 16 torpedo boats. This would significantly expand the Navy's offensive capabilities, though many of these ships weren't actually completed until after Cleveland left office, laying the groundwork for America's rise as a naval power.
Now here's a truly extraordinary and, at the time, completely secret event from his second term that speaks volumes about the pressures of the president.
Ah, yes, the secret surgery.
Amidst the intense fight for silver repeal and the raging economic depression in 1893, Cleveland sought medical advice for persistent soreness and an ulcer on his hard palate. Clinical samples sent anonymously to avoid public alarm were diagnosed as an epithelioma, which was later confirmed to be a verrucous carcinoma, a low-grade epithelial cancer.
Cancer, while president, during a crisis. Wow.
Exactly. Cleveland made the remarkable and ethically complex decision to have surgery in complete secrecy, fearing that any public knowledge of his cancer would plunge the already reeling financial markets into an even deeper depression.
How'd they keep it secret?
The surgery took place on July 1st, 1893, aboard a private yacht, the Oneida, disguised as a vacation cruise off Long Island. The surgeons operated through his mouth to avoid any visible scars on his face, removing parts of his upper left jaw and hard palate under nitrous oxide and ether.
On a yacht. Incredible.
A hard rubber dental prosthesis was then meticulously fitted to correct his speech and restore his appearance, and a meticulously crafted cover story about 2 bad teeth was used to placate the inquisitive press.
So the public had no idea?
None. The full dramatic details of this covert operation were not revealed until 1917, long after Cleveland had lived many years following the successful surgery by one of the participating surgeons, Dr. William Williams Keene.
This raises an incredibly important question about leadership, transparency, and the perceived stability of a nation during times of national crisis. What's your take on a president taking such extreme measures to keep his health a secret from the public, even if it was done with the intention of preventing further economic panic?
It's tough, isn't it?
On one hand, you can absolutely understand the fear of triggering an even worse economic collapse. The markets were incredibly fragile, and the perception of presidential health could have been catastrophic. But on the other, it represents such a profound withholding of information from the American people, from whom he derived his power. It makes you wonder, where's the line between protecting the nation and being accountable to it?
Yeah. It's a debate we still have today, just with different technologies and expectations. A stark contrast to our modern expectations of immediate transparency, but it really underscores how much the office of the president was seen, then as now, as a symbol of stability.
And how easily that trust could be eroded by perceived weakness or uncertainty.
And speaking of challenges, Cleveland also experienced significant trouble with the Senate regarding his judicial appointments in his second term.
Oh yeah, more fights with the Senate.
In 1893, he nominated William B. Hornblower to the Supreme Court, but Hornblower was rejected by the Senate, 2430, largely due to Senator David B. Hill's continued opposition, partly because Cleveland hadn't sufficiently consulted senators beforehand.
Hill again blocking him.
Exactly. Frustrated but undeterred, Cleveland then nominated Wheeler Hazard Peckham, another New York attorney who, like Hornblower, had openly opposed Hill's powerful machine.
Yeah.
And predictably, Peckham, too, was rejected by the Senate, 3241, cementing a pattern of senatorial obstruction.
Well, 2 rejections in a row.
Facing this unprecedented defiance, Cleveland acquiesced in an inoffensive choice, as one historian put it, nominating Senator Edward Douglas White, who was finally confirmed unanimously, ending the deadlock.
Had to pick a senator to get confirmed.
Seems like it. Later, in 1895, another vacancy allowed him to nominate Rufus Wheeler Peckham, Wheeler's brother, who was, perhaps ironically, easily confirmed, showing how much political tides could shift.
Politics is strange.
On a more positive and unifying note, Utah became the 45th state on January 4, 1896, after Congress passed an enabling act in 1894, adding another star to the Union during his second term.
So, this second term, it truly illustrates the immense and unrelenting pressure Cleveland faced, from a severe economic depression and widespread labor unrest to complex international incidents and a hostile obstructionist Senate.
Yeah, it sounds exhausting.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it clearly explains why he left office severely unpopular, even among many within his own Democratic Party. His rigid adherence to principles, while earning him admiration from some for his consistency, alienated others who felt his policies neglected the suffering of ordinary Americans and failed to adapt to the rapidly evolving needs of an industrializing nation.
By 1896, Cleveland found himself politically isolated, almost a man without a party. His agrarian and Silverite enemies had gained firm control of state Democratic parties, and the National Democratic Party explicitly repudiated his administration and his cherished gold standard.
Right, the party platform rejected him.
They went on to nominate the eloquent and fiery William Jennings Bryan on a free silver platform, signaling a dramatic ideological shift for the party.
The Cross of Gold speech era.
Exactly. Cleveland, deeply disheartened, silently supported the Gold Democrats, a third-party ticket formed to defend the gold standard and limited government, which were his core principles. However, he wisely declined their nomination for a third term, knowing it was a futile effort.
Smart move, probably.
They only managed to win about 100,000 votes, a clear sign of his diminished political capital. The Republican nominee, William McKinley, ultimately triumphed over Bryan in a campaign largely fought over the gold versus silver standard, marking the end of Cleveland's era.
So, retirement. Where did he go?
After leaving the White House on March 4, 1897, Cleveland retired to his Westland mansion in Princeton, New Jersey. He remained intellectually active, elected to the American Philosophical Society in 1897, and served as a trustee of Princeton University.
Ah, Princeton.
He famously sided with Dean Andrew Fleming West in a dispute over the graduate school with then-university president Woodrow Wilson, a battle of academic titans.
Cleveland versus Wilson at Princeton.
Right. He even consulted occasionally with President Theodore Roosevelt on national matters, showcasing his enduring influence, but couldn't accept the chairmanship of the Coal Strike of 1902 Commission due to financial reasons.
Interesting. Did he comment on social issues?
He did. Cleveland also publicly weighed in on social issues, sometimes in ways that would be deeply controversial today. In a 1905 Ladies' Home Journal article, he expressed his very traditional views on women's suffrage, writing that sensible and responsible women do not want to vote. The relative positions to be assumed by men and women in the working out of our civilization were assigned long ago by a higher intelligence.
Oof. Yeah, definitely a product of his time on that one.
Very much so. In 1906, he was briefly promoted for a U.S. Senate candidacy by some New Jersey Democrats, but he ultimately did not run, content with his retirement.
So how did his life end?
His health, which he had famously kept secret during his presidency, began to decline over several years. In the autumn of 1907, he fell seriously ill. Grover Cleveland died peacefully on June 24, 1908, at the age of 71 in Princeton, New Jersey, from a heart attack.
His final words are incredibly poignant and I think encapsulates his entire public life. For better or worse, his last words were, "I have tried so hard to do right."
Wow. What a powerful final statement. It really does encapsulate his entire public life, for better or worse.
A powerful statement of conviction and self-assessment, even on his deathbed. He is buried, fittingly, at Princeton Cemetery.
Cleveland's legacy is, of course, also marked by numerous honors and memorials across the country. Many places are named after him, reflecting his impact. Grover Cleveland Hall at Buffalo State University, Grover Cleveland Middle School in his birthplace of Caldwell, New Jersey, Grover Cleveland High School in Buffalo, New York, the town of Cleveland, Mississippi, and even Mount Cleveland in Alaska.
He also holds a truly unique place in media history as the first U.S. president ever to be filmed, back in 1895.
First filmed president. Cool detail.
Yeah. He's been featured on U.S. postage stamps in 1923, 1938, and 1986. His portrait famously graced the $1,000 bill of Series 1928 and 1934, as well as the $20 Federal Reserve notes. And appropriately given his two distinct terms, he was featured on two separate dollar coins in 2012 as both the 22nd and 24th president.
2 coins for 2 terms. Fitting.
In 2013, he was posthumously inducted into the New Jersey Hall of Fame.
So what does this all mean for us today? Grover Cleveland stands as a truly unique figure in American presidential history, the only one to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. He was a man of immense personal conviction, a champion of fiscal conservatism and limited government, famous for his numerous vetoes and his fierce opposition to corruption and imperialism, especially regarding Hawaii. He was a leader who rigidly adhered to his principles, often at odds with both his own party and the prevailing political currents of his time.
Yet, his story also reminds us of the profound challenges of leadership. He presided over a severe economic depression and made decisions, such as the Dawes Act and his unwavering handling of the Pullman Strike, that drew widespread criticism and made him deeply unpopular by the end of his second term.
Right, the unpopularity is key too.
His career highlights the incredible resilience required in politics, but also the immense difficulties of adhering to rigid principles in the face of shifting public sentiment and complex national crises. His life invites us to consider, can a leader truly do right if their definition of right alienates the very people they govern or overlooks the suffering caused, even unintentionally, by their policies? What happens when deeply held beliefs clash with the evolving, sometimes desperate needs of a nation?
Those are powerful questions that resonate even today, reminding us that the path of leadership is rarely straightforward. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating, complex, and utterly unique life of Grover Cleveland. We'll see you next time for another journey into the stories that shape our world.